We would like, at this point, to start with the questions from the board. Do I have any volunteers? Okay, Jim, go ahead.
And thank you very much. Appreciate time and effort you've put into that report. I'd kind of like to go back to the beginning on page 5 or slide 5, which is the mission statement. Yeah, that's it. So you were given this mission statement, correct? The mission statement says, supply the residents and businesses of Naperville with consistent and cost-effective power source to meet the community's power needs while exploring more sustainable energy sources. If I was writing this, I would replace the word consistent with reliable, personally. That means more to me than consistent. I don't know what consistent means. But I'll ask Utility Director Groth, because he probably knows the answer to this, is where did this mission statement come from? Did you create it for them, or how did this come about?
So this was in a presentation that I gave to Council in May of 2024, and it was related to the focus of what the utility is. It was around what the utility is doing. It was part of our rate study.
So was this mission statement run by the City Council?
Yeah, and I believe it was May 21st of 2024.
Did they agree to it?
There was a discussion about it, yep.
Okay, so one could argue this is the City of Naperville's mission statement subdivided down into your utility department. When you do your work, you're doing this kind of work for other people. Do you see these same kind of goals for other cities or other entities that you do work for?
So the reason why we're highlighting consistent or, to your point, Jim, reliable and cost effective is that I think coming back to why, as a public utility, what exactly is the mission here? Like, you're trying to supply your load, and there, like I've talked about, there are so many different ways of supplying your load, and I would say being reliable and being cost effective are the two goals that we are seeing. And as I discussed earlier, there are different public utilities out there, like looking at how do we transition away from fossil, but the point is that they're always working through it in a way that's cost effective or affordable for residents. And we can go into a lot more discussions on specific pricing and why cost is this way. But in most of the cases, I would say, yes, that's what people are trying to do. As we're going through the energy transition, trying to figure out a pathway that's beneficial to the community, that's also affordable for the community.
Okay, so you see these similar goals elsewhere. Yeah. Reliable, cost-effective, and sustainable.
Correct.
You see that a lot. Are they usually in that order? Reliable, cost-effective, and then sustainable are usually placed in that order?
I would say reliable is usually the first priority, that people focus on reliability a lot, especially at the local level. Yeah, I would say that's probably the right order: reliable, cost-effective, and sustainable.
Okay, so the City of Naperville has adopted this mission statement, which puts these goals in this order: reliable, I use the word consistent, I'm going to replace it with reliable. Reliable, cost-effective, and sustainable. Okay, that's the order. In terms of reliability, I see two levels of reliability that exist. One is at the very local level, and for Naperville, that's our utility company. And I think Naperville has endowed our utility company with enough funds to make a very reliable local utility. In other words, we bury our power lines. Brian's got all kinds of transformers in the warehouse and things like that. So I've lived here for since 1991. That's 30-some years, and early on we had a lot of power outages, but we just don't have them anymore. Zero. I mean, zero in the last 20 years, I think. So there's the local reliability that's part of that overall arching theme. But then you have the grid reliability, right? And Naperville doesn't have much control over that. And I don't know if you saw our discussion from last week or not, but I brought up the fact that the grid reliability is at risk.
Yep.
It seems like PJM, MISO, all these RTOs are raising the red flags. I won't go into that again.
Yep.
So I think reliability has been taken care of in Naperville as best as it can. So now we'll go to cost effective, and that's the whole, nature of your discussion here. Just moving down this one slide a little bit. No, you can stay there.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. So one of the, the question in there is why now? Excuse me, and I think this addresses the question that people are saying, listen, excuse me, people are saying, hey, this contract doesn't end for 10 years. Why is Naperville being forced into making a decision now? And in fact, IMEA has given us a deadline of April 30th. I don't know how hard of a deadline that is or not. I don't know. It's kind of like an option. You have an option and it expires, and then if you've been in the money, you lose that value. But I think these are your statements next here. It says all alternative options will require 5 to 10 years of preparation, including staffing, PJM market entry, contracting with resources, or building new resources. That's your statement, right?
Correct.
And that's that last bullet there seems to be that's alternative options besides IMEA, right? That's kind of how you wrote that?
So PJM market entry and contracting with resources and building new resources, like last three are both,
Yeah,
like
so
all of them
so-
outside of IMEA.
So the bullet that starts with IMEA is going with IMEA. The last bullet is the other options,
Correct.
right? So I have a question for you. IMEA was here not too long ago, or last week. And I don't know if you've watched.
I did.
They presented in Winnetka,
Yep.
in case you didn't know that. Why is it different for Naperville to do the 3 non-IMEA options in the sense of 5 to 10 years of preparation, PJM market entry, contracting with resources, or building new resources? Why is that different if Naperville did that versus what IMEA has to do from this point forward to replace the coal plants that are going to be reduced in rate and shut down? Why is it different for IMEA to have a 5 to 10 year window from Naperville having a 5 to 10 year window? What are they going to do much quicker?
So first thing that's definitely different is that Naperville currently don't have these functions. Naperville currently don't have the staff to do market entry, to do PPA, or to build and operate a new resource. So that staffing part in terms of finding the right people, figuring out how many do you need, what kind of other outside services do you need to contract with. So that's the part that really is different, when you're looking, other than like looking at these other functions. That's really the key difference that Naperville versus IMEA has, right? So IMEA currently already has those functions, so they are trying to, for example, purchase more from PJM or extend their contract or find a different set of PPAs and stuff like that. So the staffing piece is a critical difference between Naperville doing this themselves, yourselves, and then IMEA continue to do that. But in terms of contracting, all right, so maybe the second point to that is that it does take time for market entry. So IMEA currently is already a market participant at PJM. So that's, again, a key difference in terms of Naperville trying to do this yourself. You have to become a market participant with PJM. You have to register, go through different credit requirements, signing different agreements with the PJM. So that also takes time. But in terms of contracting with resources, signing PPA, or building new resources, those are the type of projects that are going to be, similar. So maybe it would take similar time for IMEA to do it versus for Naperville to do it. you could say that IMEA might have more experience doing it because they've been doing it for a long time versus, you know, starting anew, trying to figure out how do I contract with the resources, you know, what kind of people do I want to find, you know, where do I start, like looking for different resources within PJM territory, or trying to find the right place to build a new resource. That would be like, you know, the experience level. And you can argue that you can find people who would do that. So I think that part, in terms of PPA signing, finding new resources, that's probably going to be consistent in terms of time requirement.
Just as a data point, they did do a new solar project, Bee Hollow, and they said it took 9 years to develop that project, which is in line with the 5 to 10 year thing. So
yeah,
you know, I guess if IMEA is going to have to go out and secure more clean resources like Bee Hollow or whatever, and it took them 9 years to do that one. It seems like they would need just as much time to develop new resources as Naperville might, which you're indicating is a 5 to 10 year window. So we can just leave it at that.
yeah.
I wanted to dive into capacity a little bit.
Sure.
And you could maybe go to, yeah, that slide right there. You did a good, you made a good description of what capacity is. You know, it's kind of a parallel universe that nobody understands, this issue of capacity. You know, I get my utility bill from the city of Naperville. I'm old-fashioned. It comes in the mail.
Yeah.
I open it, I read it. It's easy to understand energy. You know, I consume so many kilowatt hours. Here's the price per kilowatt hour. Here's what I'm charged for it. Same thing with water. There's no line item on my bill for capacity.
Correct.
And nobody that gets a ComEd invoice has a line item for capacity. It's just kind of buried in there.
Yeah.
And nobody understands it. But you went through, and you told us that capacity is related to a city's peak demand, right? It's kind of technical. It's measured over the 5 hottest days, usually at 4 o'clock, and they take an average of that, and then they take a snapshot of what the city was using at that time,
Yeah.
and that becomes what's called your peak load contribution, or peak load contribution, right?
Correct.
So any load serving entity, whether it be IMEA or Naperville itself, so to speak, has to meet our grid capacity requirements, right?
Correct.
Which means that you have to go out and get resources to satisfy that need.
That's right.
So, so apparently IMEA has gone out and gotten, and Naperville's peak load is about 360 megawatts, roughly. Is that a familiar number?
Yep.
So IMEA has gone out and gotten 360 megawatts of capacity. They fulfilled that obligation.
With
Correct.
a little bit more, because as you mentioned last week, there's something called a reserve margin, which means that, you know, we add some percent on top of it. Yeah.
So they build up that portfolio of capacity various ways. They own generation, so that's one piece.
Yeah.
They own some wind and solar farms. That's another piece. Then they have member generation, which is another piece.
Yeah.
And then apparently they buy the rest of it in the market. Is that how
Correct.
that works?
Yes.
I'm just curious. If I'm sitting at my desk and my boss comes in and says, Jim, go buy some capacity. How do you buy capacity?
So the load serving entity like IMEA, or if Naperville wants to become one, like you said, has that demand, right? So you have, let's say, 400 megawatt, you have to buy from the market. What PJM does is that it runs an open auction market. So PJM is telling the world, hey, I have, you know, with all my load serving entity within PJM territory, added up together, I need, you know, 50,000 megawatt of capacity. So all the resources within PJM territory that are able to provide capacity would then bid into that process and say, hey, I want to provide capacity to this 50,000 megawatt market, here's my price. And that's what you're seeing in that open auction, you know, around $300 per megawatt day is what the result of that auction is.
Okay, so if my boss tells me to buy capacity, I just go to the PJM, a mechanism for me doing that? It's just a market clear,
Correct. It's a
there's
clearing
plenty
process.
of liquidity in that market where you can just go in there and buy at whatever price it's at?
So, and Maddie, feel free to jump in if you want, but it's not a real time. So it's not like tomorrow you go and buy capacity. It's actually an auction ahead of time. So, I mean, there's some timing issues that PJM is running into, but essentially they're doing this in the future. So like you can see online, it will be like delivery year 2025, 2026, delivery year 2026, 2027, meaning that from June 2025 to June 2026, that's the year that you are buying your capacity for. So that's for that entire year. If you're buying, 400 megawatt at $300 per megawatt day, this is, $400 megawatt multiplied by 300 megawatt day multiplied by 365 days. That's how much you have to pay for your capacity obligation.
Okay, so, okay, thank you. IMEA told us that this Bee Hollow solar field that they recently contracted with is 150 megawatts. I think there's some truth in advertising in a number like that, because I don't know how anybody gets 150 megawatts out of a 150 megawatt solar field, but and they told us that the accredited capacity for that solar field was in 2035 was going to be 6 megawatts. 6 out of a 150 megawatt nameplate capacity solar field, which they told us covers 1,800 acres, which is the size of Springbrook Prairie. You don't know what that means, but whereas Prairie State, for example, it has a 1,600 megawatt nameplate capacity. Its accreditation is 80%, but IMEA owns only 15% of Prairie State. So if you do the math, 1,600 times 80% times 50%, that's 190 megawatts. So Prairie State offers IMEA 190 megawatts of capacity, whereas Bee Hollow offers 6. Now they also own another coal-fired power plant, Trimble County.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't do the math on that, but between those those coal-fired power plants, there's probably hundreds of megawatts of capacity that they own and don't have to go out and buy.
Yeah, they can
right?
count toward the capacity obligation that they have.
Right. And of course, they have some smaller generating assets that contribute that as well. Now, I'm gonna do a thought experiment here.
Okay.
I'm not suggesting this is what anybody would do. It's a thought experiment just to discuss the issue. If Naperville went on its own and just decided to, do its own thing here, and say it decided to just buy solar, again, thought experiment, I'm not saying anybody would do this. How many solar farms like Bee Hollow would they have to own to meet Naperville's peak load contribution?
So it would be, again, 400 megawatt, and then we will divide it by, let's say, so for calculation's sake, let's use like 3% accredited capacity. So 3% meaning if you have 100 megawatt solar resource.
They got 6 megawatts out of Bee Hollow.
Well, but it's out of 150, right? So it's really like 4.
But whatever, it's 6.
Yeah.
It's 6 megawatts.
Okay, so.
That's the accredited capacity. That's what they told us.
Yeah, 6 megawatt out of 150. So I was trying to do the math in terms of, okay, so out of 100 megawatt, it will be like 4.5 megawatt of capacity. So you basically take the load that Naperville has and then divide it by that number, get to, I can do a calculation right now.
So the peak load's 360, right? Or
hold on.
Naperville's peak load is about 360, right?
Okay. So 400 megawatt divided by 4.5%. I wasn't sure I was going to get grilled on math, but I will try my best. That's what.
Well, maybe I can help. If Bee Hollow gives you 6 megawatts of capacity, wouldn't you need 60 of those to satisfy Naperville's peak load? 6 times 60 is 360.
No, so it's So I'm going to use this, so 6 megawatt out of 150 megawatt, that's like a 4.5%. Okay? And then 4.5% is how much accredited capacity you get. So you basically take 400 megawatt divided by 4.5%, which is 8,000 megawatt, 8,888 megawatt of solar. So to fulfill a 400 megawatt capacity, you need 8,888 megawatt of solar multiplied by that 4.5 accredited capacity. That's how you get to the 400 megawatt. Does that make sense?
No, I think we're talking past each other. I'll just move on.
Okay.
Now, as you mentioned, PJM capacity prices have skyrocketed. I think they went from $27 to $270 or something like that.
Yeah.
Is that an indicator of impending power shortages?
So that's an indication of they don't have enough capacity. So coming back to the graph that we're showing here, the capacity is really the reliability or your insurance on when everybody decides to turn on the light at the same time. Do you have enough? Or when someone goes out of, when a generation goes out of, goes into like forced outages or they can't supply for whatever reason, do you have any others to back up and really supply that power? Or when there's a really hot summer day in the Midwest, what's gonna happen to everybody's usage? You wanna turn on your AC and see it's still running. So that's really the assurance that you want from a capacity perspective. So the high price from PJM, what the indication is really that there's not enough capacity. PJM is trying to use the price as a signal to show people like, hey, we need more capacity, please bring capacity in to the market.
So there's shortages.
Right now there is not yet, but as they are doing this capacity auction kind of going forward as a forecast, so they are forecasting like we're not gonna have enough capacity to cover our load plus the planning reserve margin, and that's why we're showing these high prices to show that we're seeing this high auction price to show that hey, we need capacity.
Okay.
Yeah. Sorry, Mehdi, want to?
I think I'll just say, yeah, I think I echo everything Ann said. It's a build signal. The one thing I'll say is it's a build signal, but there are a lot of dynamics right now in PJM that's preventing the short-term ability to build. So namely the interconnection queue, which Ann mentioned. There's a number of reforms that are currently in the works at PJM that's trying to alleviate some of that, namely a process right now that's allowing certain high accredited, capacity accredited projects to essentially be able to be slightly expedited. So while it's a high build signal, I don't think we expect that to immediately be fulfilled due to that. But I think what I'll just echo when it comes to PJM capacity, it's extremely volatile right now because of the nature of how that curve is calculated and the number of pending reforms right now, mainly driven by increased load due to demand centers, as well as really congested areas, especially on the east side of PJM. So Baltimore, Dominion is where we're seeing a lot of that price increase come from.
Could I ask a follow-on question to that?
Yeah.
Not quizzing you on that, but do you know anecdotally how much capacity is in the interconnection queue pipeline?
Can you be closer to?
Sorry, do you know how much capacity is in the interconnection queue pipeline for the next 5 to 10 years?
We can find that out for you right now.
Sure, I have it. Give me 1 second. Yeah, so right now in the interconnection queue, we have a total of, I just want to make sure I have the right number of how many are currently in the queue. So overall, it's overwhelmingly, a total of 72 megawatts are expected to clear in 2024 and 2025. That is primarily, majority of that solar, followed by wind, followed by solar plus storage, followed by storage, followed by wind. So that's what's expected to clear in the next 2 years. I will say we're currently in the process of an interconnection reform in PJM. So all new interconnections applications are currently on hold until 2026. So right now, only projects that have already submitted that can be expected to be cleared in the next several years are what's currently in the queue. However, in the last couple of weeks, that is when PJM has opened up an opportunity for about 50 projects that have not previously been in the queue to enter. So I'll confirm the exact number of what's in the queue total, but majority of that, vast majority is solar plus wind and storage and wind.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear you at the very beginning. Did you say 72, was it megawatts?
Sorry, that is the amount that's expected to clear the process in the next 2 years. Let me confirm how much is total in the queue total.
Okay, thank you.
Just as an FYI, IMEA told us it took 4 years to clear the MISO queue for their Bee Hollow project.
So
So I think that's what you're referring to. I don't want to dwell on that anymore. That's fine.
it's probably similar.
Is it your, you know, the price of capacity went up 800%. That means there's a shortage of something. You know, I'm just trying to keep it simple
Correct.
here. Is it your expectation that capacity prices are going to continue to go up in the future, go down? What's your opinion on that?
So our expectation is that capacity price will continue to go up, and that is because this is what energy transition look like. When you have a lot of renewable resources that cannot count for a lot of capacity, transitioning into the supply stack and then transitioning out dispatchable fossil fuels, you are going to be short on capacity. And that's just the nature of how these resources are, again, trying to meet that peak demand whenever that happens. So that's why we're seeing all these, you know, different dynamic. Every single year, though, PJM kind of recalculates how they count solar and wind, and it's usually going down. And then that's what happens when you just don't have enough resources to meet the capacity needs. You're going to see higher prices, but as you are aware that there has been sort of a Pennsylvania versus PJM kind of thing going on. Pennsylvania government basically asked PJM to put a price cap on capacity pricing, saying this is too high for the load to pay. We need you to actually cap it at some point. So they have a cap that's in effect for the next
Right.
2 auction cycles.
Right.
We don't know what's going to happen afterwards.
Doesn't a cap on capacity prices basically disincentivize why you even have
Correct.
a capacity market? You want to have high prices to incent generation. Putting a cap on it just going to slow that down, right?
Yeah, that's correct, yeah.
Okay.
And sorry, I will add, there's about 230 gigawatts of capacity in the interconnection queue that's expected to clear. I will say the large majority of that are fairly low capacity accreditation resources like
Like
solar
Bee
and
Hollow,
storage, yeah.
6 megawatts.
Yeah.
Right. So you did say that you believe capacity prices are
Correct.
only going up.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to switch from capacity, the mysterious capacity, to energy now, which is, everybody understands energy. You use a certain amount of energy, there's a price for it, and that's what you pay. I'm going to recite some numbers here. And again, I'm trying to just keep this very simple. You know, I know it could get very complex very quickly, but I'm just trying to keep it simple in my mind at least. This is all back of the envelope stuff, so just take it for what it's worth. And I'm going to kind of recite some numbers, and I'd like you to tell me if at any point I am wrong in anything that I said or, in your opinion, is off base, okay?
Sure.
Last week, IMEA told us that the current cost of production from Prairie State and Trimble County was about $30 a megawatt. Okay, that's what they said. And as you understand, it's a mine-to-mouth operation. They own everything. They own the coal in the ground. It's just the cost of producing, right? There's no market numbers in that whatsoever. Naperville pays more than that now because there's bonds laid on top of that we're paying off, and in 10 years, those bonds will get paid off, right? So you're kind of back to the $30 number in 2035. I just used 2% inflation, for example, to take that price of $30 from today to what will it be in 2035, and at 2% inflation at $30 becomes $37 in 2035. Are you with me?
Yep.
So $37 price of power in 2035. I can justify the 2% if you want me to, but
No.
that's what I did.
It's fine.
Now, similarly, at the same meeting, IMEA told us that the PPA that they did for
Be hollow.
or excuse me, Bee Hollow, that they did. Well, let's put it this way: for solar projects that were similar to Bee Hollow
Yeah.
in the area they did it at, the price of that power is $75 a
Yes.
megawatt hour.
Yeah.
75. So I'm looking at the difference. Well, and actually, could you go to your slide 38, please? Okay, so just recapping, the price that Naperville, if the IMEA contract was extended, the price that Naperville would pay for power from those power plants is roughly $37, okay? The solar field, similar to Bee Hollow, is $75. Your slide here, you have listed solar PPA at $80 plus $8, wind at 85 plus 10. So you've kind of listed some prices here that you think are reasonable for
Correct.
today, and they're much higher than the Bee Hollow type of arrangement.
So I wouldn't say much higher. The number IMEA used was from IPA auction recently, so that's around $75. So IPA auction would be the one who kind of IPA is the agency putting the RFP out and then trying to procure both energy and REC, so renewable energy credit for those projects. And the reason auction price is around $76, I believe that's the number. So the reason why we're using $80 here is kind of our market intelligence of collecting what is available from the developer. That's
okay, well,
proposing.
let's just call it $80. Let's
Okay.
say your slide is $80.
Yeah.
Okay, so, 75, 80.
Yeah.
To me, it's the same thing.
Yep.
So, so I'll take the difference between $75 and $37. That's $38 per megawatt hour, lower price from Prairie State, for example, than Bee Hollow. And if you assume that all new power that's going to be built is a Bee Hollow-like type of thing, it's going to be solar or wind. There's going to be some battery thrown in. So these prices are probably where they are and where they're going to be at minimum. Do you think these prices are going to go up in the future, go down in the future? What's your expectation of your $80 that you show on your slide? Going up, down, staying the same?
So
I don't need a real long answer. I just need you to kind of indicate which direction it's going.
I unfortunately can't give you a specific answer. It could be around the same price point, and I can give you a long-winded explanation why, but there are many factors affecting the PPA pricing. I would point out, though, when you're signing a 20-year deal, you're locking in your pricing. So whether it goes up later, at a later time, you are kind of, you're locking that in, and you know what your energy cost is. So maybe is that your question in terms of if we wait a little bit at a later
just
time?
trying to get a feel from you as to whether solar prices are going to go up in the future or down in the future from now.
So
If you don't know, that's okay. If you don't want to say it, that's fine. I don't want to belabor the point. Other people have questions. Let's just say it's going to stay the same.
I'm gonna, so if I can show you this graph on the lower right-hand corner, and we can probably go back a little bit longer as well, and then you can see that the technology evolution that you would see in terms of solar prices coming down would be like, if I extend that x-axis here, it's only, starting from Q2 2022, if I go back, 10 years, you do see a significant drop of solar PPA price because the equipment pricing are coming down a lot. But right now, we're in a period of seeing this growing up because of demand, because of the project. So the fact that solar panels are definitely getting cheaper, I'm not so sure, with the tariff that we're gonna, see. But essentially, the technology itself is getting cheaper. But that does not mean that the project itself is getting cheaper because of all these other costs that is involved in building a project.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
If I could, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I'm going to be done here in a minute. So again, with the delta right now between the coal price in 2035 $37. And the Honeybee, or excuse me, the Bee Hollow solar farm at $75. Again, that's a $38 delta. So you're with me on that?
Yes.
Now, Naperville consumes anywhere from 1.2 to 1.3 million megawatts per megawatt
Annually.
hours per year.
Yeah.
Now, as we're told, often Naperville buys 80% of its power from coal-fired power plants. So I'm going to just take 80% of that number. So that's roughly 1 million megawatt hours per year.
Mm-hmm.
So you agree with that number?
Yes.
That Naperville is getting from coal roughly 1 million megawatt hours per year. Now I'm going to take that delta of $38 that we just worked through. To me, that means that the difference between buying power from these coal-fired power plants versus investing in new solar fields is $38 per megawatt hour times a million megawatt hours per year. That's $38 million. Am I doing the math right?
Correct. Yes. So you're saying that instead of using solar, you are using coal, and then the difference is $38 per megawatt hour, and because you're consuming 1 million megawatt hour per year, and that's $38 million.
Right.
Yep.
So I don't know if I can make it any simpler than that, but it seems to me that if Naperville stays with IMEA, because it has this incredibly cheap power versus going off on its own and buying solar fields or windmills, which are kind of the same price. I know it could be offset by batteries, to peak shave and things like that. But it looks to me like we're looking at $38 million a year starting in 2035 price difference to the ratepayers of Naperville to go with IMEA versus not.
So I do want to point out, as probably many audience in this room would also point out, is that you're not going to be CEJA compliant if you continue down this road with coal, correct?
I'm sorry.
So, you're not going to be compliant with the CEJA law in Illinois, that if you continue to go down the road with coal.
Of course.
So hence the reason why IMEA came up with a plan to transition away from coal. So if we're talking about price perspective, yes, it is cheaper right now to do coal, and we can argue why this is the case, whether coal power plants are getting more subsidies or anything like that. I think someone mentioned that we have to look at the true levelized cost of energy. We can get into that, all that. Everybody has different subsidies. I can say that solar also gets ITC, at least for now, in terms of tax benefit. So it's not going to be the actual true cost of energy. It's really what you can get in the market today, and that is the fact that we're seeing right now, is that Prairie State as a power plant is going to be cheap. I mean, at this point, is cheaper than what they can get.
I'm just trying to put a number on it. That's all. And
I agree.
I'm just using you. I'm kind of bouncing this off of you to make sure I haven't made a mistake somewhere along the line.
So the math is correct. Yes.
Right. Now, of course, Prairie State has to reduce its emissions by 45% in 2038. So Naperville would enjoy those savings for 3 years, but then the price is going to go up because the rate is going down. They won't enjoy as much, but there'll still be savings. But the point I'm trying to make is that there's a significant dollar savings for Naperville to stay with IMEA because they own the coal plants, which are cheap producers of power.
Yep.
Not everybody wants to hear that, but that's the truth. That's,
that's correct. Yep.
Telling it like it is. So I'm going to finish up here. In your report, you really list, you have 4 options. Market purchase from PJM, contract via power purchase agreements, owning assets, and stay with IMEA. Those are the 4, right?
So I think I want to reiterate that on the left-hand side, those are not mutually exclusive. So when you decide to stay outside of a joint action agency, you can pick and choose, what combination of that market purchase, PPA, and owning assets that you want as a combination. So that's why I have those like three supply stack, stack there as an example of you could choose A, you can choose B, you can choose C, but it's really, I think that comes back to the autonomy, or if the community of Naperville really wants to decide where their energy is coming from, that's the different mix that you can get from this buffet.
I'm just repeating what you literally wrote down in your report. There's 4 options. I just repeated what the 4 of them are. That's all I did.
That's
fine. That's fine. Let's move on.
Okay.
I'm sure people are dying to ask questions here. Of those 4 options that you listed, 3 are in fact the same, and I'd label them as leave IMEA. 3 of them are leave IMEA. The 4th one is stay in IMEA, correct?
So if I may, I do see this more as a tree branch type of decision. So the first decision point is whether you want to stay within a joint action agency or you don't want to stay.
I'm trying to keep it simple here. I think the 3 are leave IMEA. The last one is stay in IMEA.
Okay.
There's different variations of it that you can walk through amongst those 3. But so getting back to the numbers that I just generated while fact checking with you, it seems to me that there's 2 options in your report. One is to stay in IMEA, one is to leave IMEA. The stay in IMEA option, to me, looks like it saves Napervillians about $38 million a year, starting in 2035. The go it alone, or the other 3 options, join another joint action agency, it's all the same. They're going to invest in solar, wind, and battery. Those are the options if you don't stay with IMEA. You brought up investing in natural gas. Nobody's going to do that. If you leave IMEA, nobody's going to invest in natural gas. That's not an option. It's solar, wind, and battery. So to me, it seems like your report can be condensed down to 2 options: leave IMEA or stay in it. And one, to me, has far superior economics to it. I just wanted to put a number on the dollars, and I'll just leave it at that. And you can say whatever you want at this point.
Okay. I would respectfully disagree. I do think we're providing a lot more options than looking at whether to stay or leave. And as we kind of went through the slides in terms of the cost projections where IMEA is coming from, we did point out that as they change their supply stack, their cost is going to go up high as well. So I think the message here is that as you transition from fossil fuel resources to renewable, there is going to be cost increase, regardless of whether you're doing it with IMEA or you're doing it yourself. As you pointed out, $37 versus $75, that's the difference there, that we're looking at whether IMEA is the one who's procuring or Naperville is the one who's procuring, you are going to see a price difference there.
Yeah, I'm not debating that our prices, if we stay with IMEA, I'm not debating that our bill will get higher every year. It's going to get higher every year because they're going to have to invest in solar, wind, and battery, which is expensive.
Correct.
That's what they're going to have to do.
Yes.
As the coal-fired power plant rolls off their stack reductions or complete eliminations, they're going to have to replace it with wind and solar. That's why the price is going to go up. There's no doubt about it.
Yes.
With IMA, the price is going to go up.
Yeah.
If Naperville does it by itself, or the other 3 options that you mentioned, we're just in that same boat. We're going to be investing in wind, solar, and battery, and those prices are going to be just as high as what IMEA does. I'm only talking about the slice of the supply that comes from these coal-fired power plants. That piece of it is cheap.
Yes.
To the tune of $38 million a year starting in 2035.
Okay.
That's all I'm trying to get here. I'm not saying prices aren't going to go up with IMEA. It's just that there's a delta between doing it yourself and IMEA, which is that number. I don't think you and I disagree on anything.
I agree. Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you, Jim. Are there any other questions here? And Russ, I haven't forgotten you. Phil?
And thanks for trying to take a super complex topic and simplify it. I respect the level of difficulty of talking about BRA and capacity and FTRs and ARRs to.
We're not there yet, so
Yeah,
we'll see when we
simplify it
get there.
into common language. My questions are kind of all over the board here, but just one clarifying one up front, and Brian, step in here maybe if this question's more for you. Was CES charged with providing any kind of specific recommendations as part of this report? If not, are there ones that are anticipated, or is this more just an analysis of kind of the state of the market?
Let me answer that question. When I said earlier, the purpose of this meeting today is so that we dedicate ourselves to a complex issue and try not to spread ourselves too thin on what's the final, because I think we're not there yet. And I think we're going to get some more.
I understand that. I'm asking if CES at some point is expected to provide any recommendations, or if this is the scope, the end of the scope.
No, so what we envisioned is that a discussion here, conversation here, and then CES is going to provide a recommendation that'll be reviewed at the April 8th special session of PUAB, right? So I think, and I don't want to speak for Ann, but I think the overall goal here was to hear comment, public comment, hear the board discussion around this, and then use that to formulate CES's final recommendation.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay. All right. Can you go back to the infamous slide 38? So there was slides earlier on, I think it was 14, 16, and 18 that had the price comparisons. Help me understand the price projections and the timeline. I guess maybe first going back to the ones that were done of comparing the price of electricity in Naperville compared to buying from PJM.
Yep.
For example, I mean, you talked about this earlier, that you expect that capacity prices are going to continue to stay the same or go higher.
Yep.
Historically, in PJM and ComEd specifically, the capacity prices have been, if you look at the last 10 years, they've been a third to half of what they are on average. So one could argue that this is an anomalous year driven by some of the factors that you've talked about, or maybe those prices could go up. But I think if we're talking about ranges, it's very possible that the price comparisons maybe are even aggressively high. In theory, the prices could go down. So I guess I could just ask you to comment on that, and then I have a follow-up question on this slide.
Yeah, sure. So I think on the capacity price, I think why we are pretty sure that it's going to go up, again, is because of the supply stack change. So when you go back 10, 15 years ago, we had to have a similar supply stack. We have nuclear, we have natural gas. Again, these are the resources that have high capacity accreditation to them. So they can count toward high capacity. If for whatever reason, a particular plant retired and it's not available for capacity auction anymore, and that's when you will see some price spikes. There could be like local issues like that. But I think what I was trying to stress is that we are in that energy transition today, right? So we are going to see a lot of fossil fuel generation being retired. We're going to see a lot of renewable coming up. And the fact that these two type of, or if I can categorize them into like two big bucket of technology in terms of fossil versus renewable, they just have different capacity accreditation. So the matter of the fact is that you're going to have a much thinner supply stack from capacity perspective, and that's why you're seeing the capacity price as it is today.
Okay. Anecdotally, following that, large wind developers have started to pair very large-scale storage with wind development in the Midwest. I mean, that's by scale factor increasing the capacity factor of those wind farms quite a bit. Is that being factored into the capacity availability? Because when we talk about this, we kind of make it sound like the world's going to end because we're shifting to renewables and there's no capacity, but it seems like technology and the implementation of other designs have started to try to counteract that.
So if you see in this particular stack that I compare nameplate versus accredited, the green, sorry, I used a really bad color, but the green, web kind of section there is battery. So you can see that, for example, in the supply stack in 2050, that green web section on the nameplate is counted for a significant deck of that green web section in the accredited. So battery itself does have a fairly robust accreditation because, again, it's dispatchable. It's dispatchable is a little bit limited, though. It's dispatchable. It's not just like a gas plant, right? Because a gas plant would be there whenever you need it. A battery would be there whenever there's energy in the tank. If you don't have energy in the tank, it won't be available. And that's why it has a lower capacity accreditation than gas.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
So
sorry.
batteries accounted for, I guess that's the short answer.
Got it.
For, yeah.
All right. So now if we could go back to slide 38 again. I'm trying to understand what, you look at the area that's shaded in pink and the multipliers.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure if this is what the chart is intended to represent, but this is, I feel like it's sort of a projection of what we should expect the cost for IMEA to be as compared to buying to PJM, from PJM, or am I misinterpreting?
So the black solid line is a projection of what IMEA's revenue requirement is going to grow. So the way that I define revenue requirement would be looking at how much energy am I buying from particular resources. And if I'm swapping out them, as Jim pointed out, from fossil fuels to renewable, I'm going to see my cost getting higher. So that's what the black line implies. The pink shaded area is different sensitivities or range of PPA pricing that I used, and apologize, I didn't explain this clearly on the slide, but really that pink shaded range is if I use different PPA, like a range of PPA numbers, right? If I go down, for solar PPA, let's say I go down to $70 versus I go up to $90, what's that range of revenue requirement look like if, let's say IMEA tomorrow is signing another deal that costs them like $90 per megawatt hour for solar. So that range kind of shows you, your potential price range. If for whatever reason PPA price becomes so much higher than where they are today, up to $100 per megawatt hour, then you're looking at a much higher revenue requirement, therefore residential bill growth, residential bill increase from that. So the red dot, the oval piece, is what I explained earlier in terms of a benchmark to what PJM is. And there's a lot of uncertainty in this particular benchmark, but I'm trying to show you that from the different attributes that you have to procure energy capacity and RECs all together, what would that price range look like? Again, a lot of caveat to it, and I can explain the details if you want to get into it. Yeah.
Okay.
Could I just
Yeah, go ahead.
maybe help clarify? Because I have the same question. Could you just correct me if I'm wrong, but that number 243 million is what IMEA collects from all of its ratepayers?
It's revenue requirement, so it's not, I don't think it's not their income. It's just when they are operating Prairie State, Trumbull County, paying PPA today, what overall is their revenue? They have to at least collect this amount of money from all of their members to make the cost work.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's going from 243 up to 690.
That's correct.
So what you're indicating here is that even if we stay with IMEA, our prices are going up,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
That's what it says.
Correct.
Like 2 times, whatever, 2.8 times.
Correct.
Okay.
That's kind of what I was trying to figure out also. But I'm wondering, again, I'm trying to find ways to simplify this as much as possible.
Okay.
Maybe if there's an edit or change or enhancement or new slide that can be made that somehow provides some better, more specific directions to try to convert this into like an expected cost per kWh or whatever, so that a common person could understand. And I realize like you can't predict the price, whatever, 30 years out. But I think where I kind of got confused was on those slides 14, 16, 18. I believe those were like kind of 2-year forecasts based
Correct.
on forward market curves.
Yeah.
And the forward market curves I don't think, go out to 2050. There's a lot of variables,
right.
but maybe there's a way to kind of normalize and help people think about the status quo and what the cost would be with IMEA, assuming that they've got to do improvements to their plants and things like that versus buying from through other alternative options.
So would it be, would it be more helpful if I come up with kind of a similar bill comparison as the earlier slides in terms of what the bill will look like in 2050? It's a very dicey exercise because I can't really get any, energy provider that would go out that way. But I mean, if you're looking at, so you're really looking at the impact to the residential bill is what you're saying.
Yeah, and maybe even going back to like starting at 2035 when the contract would expire, like what could one start to expect? That's probably maybe a little bit more predictable, but
Okay.
I feel like everybody's trying to understand what the cost is going to be if we stay with EMEA, and like how do you actually truly represent that, and is it being skewed by different sources and things that they're having to do to comply with CES versus what would be the cost if you are able to access energy in a different way, right? Regardless of whether you do that through PPAs, wholesale procurement, or whatever that might be. So somehow if you can try to pull the curtain back on that and sort of normalize it somehow in simple terms,
Okay.
that might be helpful for people to wrap their heads around.
Okay. Got it. Let me think about it and see.
Thank you. A related question to that is then, clearly we've heard from people here joining today that there's a desire to try to move towards more renewables. Some of that's going to get forced, screening of the grid. Some of it's going to happen because people have to comply with CES. I don't know where to look or to really understand. I think I can kind of decipher it from some of the graphs of even if you go to 2035 or 2040, if we're buying energy from, at that point in time, from IMEA versus buying it from wholesale market, how much of that portfolio is expected to be renewables? So if you look at it today, it sounds like IMEA is at like 11%, but PJM is probably 25 to 30% as a whole.
Maddie, can you find it? So I think one data point that I can provide in 2050 is that if you look at that supply stack, that what IMEA is trying to do is that with IMEA's plan in 2050, that part of the, so this is the energy chart, so nothing with the capacity. I would say maybe like 80% of that they're getting from their own PPA, solar, wind resources, and the remaining 20% will be from market purchase. The counterpart to that would be PJM by 2050. We're expecting about 45% of capacity coming from solar and wind, and this discount like nuclear and anything else. So solar, wind, storage, those are the ones. Oh, sorry, energy. So storage doesn't really count in this picture, but that's about. So you're looking at 80% from, RE solar, wind in 2050 versus PJM's 45%. Does that provide it? And I can come up with earlier numbers as well.
I guess so.
Could I-
Is the
could I-
question, like when we as a team think about like what the supply stack in PJM would be comparatively, PJM as a whole still will have substantial on its whole grid gas, coal, making up a big. It's not like that is going to be such a substantial small amount. Still, the majority of the power that's going to be on the PJM grid is going to be made up by those fossil. It's not like in 2040, it's all going to be PJM and IMEA. Again, this is all perspective. You have to make a lot of assumptions about what resources will come onto the grid, but across PJM, there still will be considerable, particularly gas, across the region.
Okay, I guess, so what I was trying to cover is even if you move to wholesale market procurement, that doesn't necessarily mean that there's available renewables there to procure or to buy. You may still have to do a power purchase agreement in order to.
So yeah, so one thing with market purchase is that you don't really know where your power is coming from. You can get like an average mix of what the grid power is, but I think the other specific point to point out is that, so PJM doesn't operate renewable energy credit as a market, right? So if you're really comparing, having PPA versus going out to market to purchase it, the cost, there's actually, so going out to market to purchase it, you actually have to add on that REC cost because you don't know that energy, whether it's REC, versus if you have a PPA with a solar or with a wind, that REC is, typically the REC is coming to you at that 75 or 80 or, whatever pricing is from the PPA.
Okay. Going back to kind of where we started this conversation about recommendations, but I understand that's not where we're at. I mean, what's been laid out here, I'm trying to think about these as these are pathways, not options, because options would imply that they get at a solution, and I don't think that's what was the intent of any of this, right? Because even if you pursued one of these pathways, even if staying with IMEA, they have, as you guys pointed out, there's clauses in there to go and buy additional renewable power. There's limitations on that. And so I think it's more of just a statement as I want to make it, I think the intent of this, what we've seen today, isn't to say these are kind of prescriptive pathways versus that this provides optionality of ways that the city of Naperville could go to market. And depending on which way they go to market, there's still going to be different options on how they choose to procure energy. Would you agree with that?
Yes, yeah.
Which kind of takes me to my next question, which is like, I feel like as a city, we don't actually know what we want or need, which makes it really hard to go buy something when you don't have your requirements fully defined. Now,
Yeah.
who dictates the requirements? I
Yeah.
don't know that exists in this type of a setting in a public entity, but our job is to try to help understand what the citizens want, what's economically viable, which makes me think about, whether you're doing self-generation, wholesale market, LSE, stay with IEMA, go JA, whatever, right? There's a lot of different things that we could do, but without really deciding like what problem we're solving, what's the outcome we're seeking. I think there's a lot of this is just it's pontificated, and you're educating us on this quite a bit. We talked about the local distribution reliability, like that, Brian has that covered. The grid reliability, generally speaking, I think is covered, right? PGM, that's their job to do that. I think that then leads into like, it sounds like what our requirements are is that we want, like everybody else, we want cost-effective power. We want it as cheap as possible. We want it as green as possible or renewable as possible. And then we potentially want options and flexibility for innovative solutions that can include things like virtual power purchase or VPPAs. It could be demand response, time of use, green tariffs, energy efficiency programs, which I don't think those things have been fully contemplated yet, but maybe that's part of what a next step might be. So I'm just wondering as what you guys would say to that without providing specific recommendations. What are things that we're missing or we should be thinking about more as we start to build towards really defining what the city needs and what the city can and should plan to do in the next, 15 to 25 years?
So I want to clarify that for virtual power plants, time of use rate, having like these type of issue can be, or I would say they are independent from the supply, right? So those are peak shaving you're looking at, and I actually have a slide in here kind of addressing how storage can be used for peak shaving purposes. But essentially, you're trying to reduce your peak load. You're trying to reduce some of your energy consumption, see if you can generate from behind the Naperville utility meter. That can be independent from this set of decision. Because you could, whether you stay with IMEA, whether you go to a different JAA, whether you go out and procure yourself, you could still do these things. You could still go to time of use rate. You could still try to help people reduce their peak power. The peak demand for the entire city. You could still do, distributed energy resource. You could still do VPP within the current utility territory. It doesn't have to impact the energy supply. So after that, the remaining things, you would still need someone to supply you energy, right? You still need to make that decision in terms of, okay, do I then, after I've done all these things, try to conserve as much as I can, demand response, reduce my peak, time of use rate, which I'm from California, so that's, a big thing we have there. But those are modifying your demand, making sure that you reduce peak, making sure that you utilize internal resources as much as you can, but you still have that energy supply. You can't possibly supply the entire city within your own resource. You can't become a microgrid out of the PJM territory. So that you still have to make that decision in addition to having all these programs there. Does that make sense? Okay. And then after that, I think I still go to that slide that I have in terms of conclusion is, sorry, in terms of conclusion is autonomy and risk. Those are really, at the end of the day, what you need to contemplate. Are you willing to take more risk because you want autonomy? Because you want to be the one who's deciding this is where my energy is coming from. I want to procure this amount from this particular solar at this particular price. I mean, of course, it depends on negotiation and all that, but that is really the two things that you're contemplating. Are you willing to take on more risk with the added autonomy on your resource choice?
Okay, that's clear, thank you.
Yeah.
On that note, this term may not be familiar to you guys, but have you, I didn't see it specifically called out in here, but had you evaluated a sub-account approach?
Sorry, can you get a little closer?
I didn't see it mentioned specifically in this report, but have you evaluated a sub-account approach?
Can you explain that a little bit more, what you meant?
So it's basically getting as close to becoming a LSC and PJM without directly doing that. You still become a member, but you can sit on the account of a large supplier, you know, like a Constellation. So you get a lot of the same exposure. You can basically get the same PJM bill and transparency and cost. You can manage your own capacity without taking on like the default risk for, you know, somebody, if another PJM member defaults.
No, I wouldn't say we specifically considered that as an option here that we're discussing. But I think I would need to think about that one a little bit more and see, you know, how can we take out the specific elements that we're looking into and then how they stack up with these other options that we presented. But yeah, let me think about it.
Okay. I have just a couple other questions, but related to that one, and maybe this is implied, but specifically on this slide, I think you used the term that these are not necessarily mutually exclusive, but could there be a pathway where we could stay with IMEA, but, you know, for maybe half of the energy load and you go to the wholesale market for the other half? I mean, I don't know if that's crazy or not, but.
So, and I didn't really have time to get into this, but, and I think IMEA addressed this particular item in their contract or the extension contract that they proposed as well. So there's this member-directed resources, which I think right now is about 10% of your peak demand that you can basically figure out, you know, how do you want to supply that? Brian, I don't know if you want to add more.
Absolutely. So the way the member-directed resource option works within the proposed IMEA contract is that you could get up to 10% of your load served outside the contract so long as it's considered, I'll effectively say, renewables within the state of Illinois. You could go higher with full board approval. So that is one option that we're actually looking at as a city, just so that when we present this to council, we have all of our options, is what are some of those options? What do they look like for just that 10% off the bat? So you have some price comparison. And then, like I said, there's the option, and the way that it's written in the contract is you could go higher with full board approval. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, and are these the terms under the current agreement that would be then expected, or they represent what the renewal proposes also?
So what has been said by IMEA is that if a member accepts the new contract, they would pull forward this provision, and it could effectively begin at the time of the new contract signing.
Or if we wanted to be bullish and attempt to renegotiate the contract with them, we could try to take that provision out or change it.
You mean pull it forward without a contract extension?
Right.
Something that could potentially be explored.
Not saying that it would work, just saying that everything's theoretically on the table if you're renegotiating a contract.
Yeah, IMEA is on the record, both at their board meetings and in presentations, saying that if a member signs a contract extension, they'll pull forward that clause. There's other clauses that would also pull forward, mainly with respect to representation for certain PURPA issues and things like that. But
okay. Some might be asking, why not just buy more renewable energy? Like, it sounds really simple. What's the simple answer to that for people who might have this misconception that, you know, you can just go to the to Walmart and buy it off the shelf?
Simple answer is that renewable energy might not be there when you need it. And that's just a fact of renewable energy. And that's why we kind of went through that energy capacity explanation, trying to make sure that people understand that you do need both for reliable supply. So yeah, so that's, I would say that's the simple answer of, you know, it's intermittent, it's not there, or it might not be there when you need it.
Okay. Last question, and you can make a statement, a comment. It feels like this is really complicated. I've worked with large organizations that make these kinds of decisions, and it's done as part of, you know, thinking and planning that was done a decade before. It evolves every year, and it continues to evolve, and it's part of a much bigger picture. And it almost feels like, again, we're not aligned as a city on what our requirements are or should be, and that more time needs to be taken to thoughtfully think through a plan for the coming years with all the moving parts and things that have been talked about at length in this report and tonight, which we won't get back into. But I guess I would just ask what your thoughts are on a longer term kind of resource planning exercise, if that's something that you would say is beneficial or has been helpful for others, similar entities.
Yeah, so as the two slides that I was showing earlier in terms of how other public power entities are kind of contemplating this through a formal process, integrated resource planning, most of them would have a statutory requirement of them having to do an IRP every 3 years. And then so that kind of is a long-term planning process, right? So you do look at, you know, every 3 years, you do look at what happens with the market, what happens with your load, what happens with your resource availability. And then based on that, you make the next batch decision. So as you go through, you do course correction and say, okay, this assumption that we used last time doesn't really, you know, is not valid anymore. So we're kind of going on a different set of assumptions. So I do think having this, and then I think the other part to like an integrated resource planning is that you do offer different options. So again, this is my personal opinion. I think maybe some of the frictions that we're experiencing right now is that it sounds like IMEA is not being transparent enough in terms of how they come up with this supply stack in 2050. So hypothetically, if we were to come out and say, okay, IMEA actually considered, you know, 3 different load scenarios, 5 different types of resources, and then we calculate like all these different options together. These are the different types of costs that we're seeing. The reason why we're choosing this particular supply stack is because of, you know, ABC reasons. It might be more costly than this another supply, but the reason why we're choosing it is because we want to be, you know, X% renewable, RPS and stuff like that. So that's typically how IRPs are done, right? So they look at all the different options on load, all the different projection scenarios on load, the different options on the different types of resources that they can utilize and what they can get from the market, do a longer term projection, and then come up with all these different scenarios of, okay, what should my supply stack look like? And if you want to go, you know, even further than that, you can look at all these corner cases in terms of what happens if we have a really hot year and stuff like that. So I do feel like that process kind of opens up like a black box to show people these are the things that we have considered, and the reason why we're kind of sticking with this supply stack is because of all this. And that would, you know, open up a process for people to comment, to try to figure out, examine what happens with the data, you know, why are you using this instead of that? Not saying it's an easy process, it's very difficult to get through an IRP, but I do feel like, you know, from at least what I'm hearing today, what I kind of researched specifically, I do think that would be beneficial from, you know, both Naperville, probably IMEA's perspective, to really explain why they're doing what they're doing and why this is the path that they were choosing going forward.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, I have one more question I just
Sure.
thought about. I might mince the terminology here because it gets a little complicated. I think there's public interest comments around having a more sustainable energy source, right? That's a very broad term. You can think about that in terms of percent of renewable energy procurement or generation. You can also think about it in terms of emissions or emissions factors, local, market-based, or whatever, right? I don't think I've seen anything in the report that starts to help us understand what the emissions profile for the city looks like, projecting out whatever into to 2050 or whatever timeline makes sense, based on the different energy source options and the mixes of those. Is there a way to add something like that in?
Yeah, let me come back to the team, and we should be able to add that as a, so what you're saying is that, for example, based on IME's current supply stack, you're kind of trying to figure out, at those 5-year mark, what would be your emission profile look like, or maybe compared to today's level, like how much would you have reduced? Is that
Right.
kind of, okay.
We try to kind of get at that with a proxy of saying you're going to buy X, or they're going to have X amount of renewable energy in their profile, but it really doesn't answer what would, I think, ultimately get advertised on the city's website. If we're saying, hey, City of Naperville is a great place to live, look at our emissions, we could be buying more renewable energy, and somehow the emissions footprint, scope 2 could still be increasing for some reason, right? So just trying to understand, I think, the total impact from an outcome perspective.
Yeah, sure.
That was the last question. Thank you guys for your help tonight.
Thank you very much for that. Russ, you're not in sight, but you're not forgotten. Do you have any questions that you'd like to ask? Okay. Well, you're still not forgotten. You may not be there, but you're not forgotten. Okay, so...
Your call cannot be completed as dialed. Please consult your directory and call again, or ask your operator for assistance. This is a recording.
Thank you for that. My questions that I have changed, as they normally do, because the fact someone's already asked something that I was thinking about, or a question that someone else asked made me think of something else. And I'll try to be brief, because I know these meetings, although they're long, I'm happy to see that we are doing them at this length. We're not rushing them. We're giving everybody a chance to ask their question. We're giving other people a chance at another time to make their statements also. So I think what's important, I want to kind of go back to the infamous page 38 on that, and I'm looking at it in a little bit different, and it is in relationship to some of the statements that were made at our last meeting regarding transition time, or transitioning to a different form of energy. And it seems to me that IMEA, although they have 80% coal there, that they are doing some transitioning within their financial ability, because of the fact that depending on how many of the cities continue to participate with them, determines their resources that they have available to continue to do this. And as I see the pink area going up, that we're all looking at that, and we're all trying to figure out, it's a guess. Yes, it is a guess. And I think some of the questions that we asked, can you say specifically? No one can say specifically what's going to happen. However, we can use some examples of renewable energy that you said several times is not always available. So there was a comment, and I hear this a lot also, that the cost of solar panels is going down. However, does the efficiency or the issue that makes them inefficient change?
I will need to look more closely into it, but I wouldn't say the efficiency has changed significantly over the years in terms of when they're producing. But their cost in terms of panel itself is going down.
So if the cost of panels are going down, but it's the same technology, unless they change all the heavy metals or whatever else makes a solar panel, if they've changed that technology, which doesn't seem like that's happening at this point, maybe it will. I hope it does.
In terms of increasing efficiency of solar,
right? Increasing
right.
efficiency.
I think that would be a different type of technology, different type of silicon that you're using, chip or, yeah. So it would be a
Right.
paradigm shift in terms of, and with a paradigm shift, you're not going to see the cost reduction benefit, right? So the cost reduction is on this generation of technology, and that's because people are using it, so that's why how you can get a lower cost. But if there's a paradigm shift in terms of, okay, this is a higher efficiency solar panel, so we're going to use that, you're going to go back to that higher cost again in terms of, and then seeing as people adopt it, you'll see that cost coming down.
Right.
Yeah.
So what would make solar more, I guess, usable or impactful in providing energy would be combining it with battery storage. Would you say that?
So I would go back to that capacity concept again, the fact that it's making it more the battery is making solar and wind more useful is because it will be there when you need it during that peak hour.
Right.
Yes. Yeah.
But that because of the low
Accredited
efficiency
capacity.
of the solar panel, you need more solar panels to not only provide energy when you need it, but also more energy to charge a battery. I mean, you have to have you have to have different electricity go from that solar panel, or electricity from the solar panel going to whatever you need the electricity for that day, but also you have to have some electricity going
Like extra to charge the battery.
extra
Yes, correct.
to charge
Yes.
the battery.
Yeah, yes. That's right, because battery doesn't
So
generate
now we're
energy
talking
itself.
about
Yeah.
a lot of solar panels to be able to do that. I guess where I'm going with this is that when I look at the cost or the cost of capacity going up, and there's different reasons why it goes up, not just necessarily solar panels cost, but there are costs, there are delays, there's time. So what I'm seeing at this point is that the reality, and this is what I came to with when IMEA was talking to us before, is the reality is it'd be great if we could transition now, but we can't. The earth, the world is not that way. We don't have that ability to transition right now. So we need to delay the time because there's a cost in that transition. And because of the fact that there's a cost in that transition, and because of the fact Naperville residents are looking for, as the city thinks in its mission, that we should have not only a reliable, we should have a cost-effective, besides trying to be sustainable. Now, when we talk about reliable, and we talk about CEJA that was mentioned in the report and in our conversations today, CEJA, tell me what year is CEJA requiring the natural gas generators?
So
to
depending on
offline?
where the natural gas generation is, there could be earlier date, but finally the date is January 1st, 2045, that the natural gas units would either have to be retired or reconfigured in a way that it doesn't emit CO2. So the reconfiguring could be carbon sequestration, the reconfiguring could be switching the fuel to green hydrogen, different ways of doing it. A lot of technology not currently available in terms of at a cost-effective rate yet, but that's the CEJA requirement in terms of by 2045, this is what you have to.
You're saying 45. What's happening in 2030?
So, and sorry, I need to kind of look at the specific language, but at an earlier date, if the natural gas are located at a economic disadvantaged community, they do have to retire at an earlier time.
Retire by 2030?
Retire or similar situation in terms of retire or switching your fuel to clean or capture carbon.
So you mean cleaner gas?
So cleaner gas is probably a good way to describe it, but it's really using hydrogen, basically switching out the fuel.
A different gas.
Correct, a different type of gas that doesn't have carbon in it because it's only hydrogen. Yeah.
Right. So that's a transition. So I see, I'm for transitioning for sure. I'm also not for hurting people in the process of transitioning to feel better
Yeah.
about myself. And I'm still, I'm struggling with what I see, the facts. And maybe I'm going to see facts on April 8th that are going to change my mind. I want to keep an open mind on this. But these are things that are, because this is so complex, it's not just a very easy thing that your report shows us that we could just do a switch over. We need a transition, and it takes time for transitioning. Is that what your
Correct.
report tells us?
Yes.
And that's what you're going to probably take into account, all these options.
Yeah.
All these options that we're talking about. One of the options that I thought was unusual, I mean, not unusual, new to me, was the sub-account issue on that. Would a sub-account protect us from volatility?
So, so Philip, I think I have to research a little bit, but my understanding is that probably this option wouldn't, so it doesn't, you don't become an official market participant with PJM. You're kind of like, coupling under someone else to do that. They are still doing the market purchase, so any of the price volatility that we're talking about that's inherent in the wholesale market is going to still get passed on to you. I guess maybe some of the benefit of that particular option could be that you don't have to post all these credit requirement, or maybe your credit requirement is reduced because you're kind of, coupling with someone else. So that would be more on kind of the setting up part to become a PJM market participant in terms of the effort that's saving you. Am I explaining that? Or-
Yeah, that's generally correct.
Yeah, okay.
So when I look at 38 again, and I see that IMEA, their cost is going up 2.8 later on, but that's after we receive a savings, but still, it's going to go up, no doubt about it. Can you, that's IMEA's estimate from what you've taken from their information, I guess? Is that how that works? So is it possible to see, would we assume, and I don't like to assume, can we imply, is there another way to say this, that that's how the whole market's going to go?
Yeah, so I think that's where that red oval dot is trying to show, is that if you purchase from PJM wholesale market,
Right.
plus all these other capacity recs that you have to couple together, that's the type of projection, 2.9 to 3.1 times. So slightly higher than that 2.8 projection. That's what we're trying to benchmark against in terms of this is how much IMEA's cost is going to increase if this is their supply stack in 2050 versus what we think the wholesale market plus capacity plus rec is going to look like in terms of prices.
Okay, and that includes also CEJA's requirements.
So the way that it includes CEJA requirements is by procuring RECs, yeah. So basically buying tons of RECs to meet all your energy demand.
And just for everybody's benefit and mine, could you explain the impact RECs have
So
on being clean?
yeah, so I want to take a little bit step back. So people in here. So when you buy from a wholesale market, you don't really know where that energy is coming from, right? So you buy from a wholesale market, PJM is deliver the energy to you. There's a average number in terms of how much they're getting from, and that number would change hour to hour. That does not include the renewable energy credit, meaning that you're actually counting per megawatt hour of generation from a renewable resource, solar, wind. You're really counting that and say, hey, I'm taking this credit to show that I actually have an energy, a megawatt hour of energy that's generated from a clean resource. An example would be that IPA currently procures on behalf of ComEd, let's say. And then the way that they procure it is it's what we call a bundle product. It's really just energy plus the RECs piece. So whatever that's every megawatt hour that's generating from a particular solar power plant, they are counting the RECs. So it's like an accounting system to making sure that you are actually getting that megawatt hour of energy from a clean resource. And the fact that you're doing this in a bundled manner, make sure that it's coming from like a new resource. So you're getting both energy and the rec as a sort of a bundled product. So you can actually count that toward your RPS goal. Because at the end of the day, it's really how do you count, or how many recs that you have that will count toward your energy consumption.
So you're using that rec to obtain the purchase of energy.
To certify it's clean, basically.
That's
You can-
certified
yeah,
clean.
Yeah.
To use it when the renewable energy is not available. In other
No,
words,
so
what's
rec
it
is,
putting into the grid?
yeah, no, so rec is just, you can think of it as an accounting mechanism. So it's not an actual physical product,
understand.
right? So it's not an actual physical thing that you would get. It's an accounting mechanism that people use to calculate RPS. So the renewable portfolio standard. So how do you count for today? How do you count what % of your energy is really coming from a renewable resource? So the way you count it would be simpler if you have a PPA and just say, I'm getting 20% of my energy directly from this particular solar plant. And because I also purchased RECs, I can actually count those 20% towards my RPS goal and say I'm meeting 20% of my RPS goal. But the same thing, if that plant is generating or selling into PJM, PJM doesn't give you REC. It's just energy that they're giving you. That's why they can't tell you where their energy is coming from. Someone else have to go out and purchase that REC and say, hey, I want that REC to count toward my energy use. And that's how I can claim the same 20% RPS. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it tells me it's very complicated to be able to show where is the energy coming from. I mean, you can't count, and they're not different electrons going
Correct.
this way and
That's
that
right.
way. So
Yeah,
you're
they don't
just
label
kind of saying,
themselves.
this
Exactly.
is what we believe is going into it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's an accounting system, yes.
Yeah, it's an accounting system. So what all of this has demonstrated is the complexity of it. And going back to the mission again of the city of Naperville is reliability, cost effectiveness, and sustainability. We want to accomplish all three of those in a priority, I would imagine. If you have no reliable energy, you can't do any of the other things. So that has to come. If you can't afford it, you can't
Correct.
have access to it either.
Yeah.
So these things have to be balanced.
Correct.
And again, we want to transition maybe to nuclear, maybe to something that's totally clean, and that would be great. But if Naperville does not participate with IMEA, I'm not sure how much money Naperville would dedicate for renewable energy when they're starting either themselves or with another organization or trying to change things versus participating in IMEA that is in fact going towards renewable. And the percentage is not there, of course. And there's a difference of opinion as to the benefit or the lack of benefit from coal. And that we're still searching, and we're going to hear another point of view on that I think is useful. So I think we have a big job in front of us to culminate and figure out what's the best thing for Naperville at this point and its citizens. So, you have okay, go ahead. And we have, oh yes, one moment. Go ahead. Go ahead, Jim.
Excuse me, Ann, maybe you can clarify something for me, and it relates to the question about creating a sub-account, but any scenario where Naperville is a PJM market participant, correct me if I'm wrong, but the only power you can buy from PJM is either real-time or day-ahead, right?
Correct.
And those prices go like this. The industry I came from, the energy industry, is used to volatility in pricing. You know, crude oil, gasoline, diesel goes up and down. It's just another day in the office.
Yeah.
But municipal utilities don't want to deal with fluctuating prices. They like price certainty.
Correct.
They want to be able to, set the price for the next
Yes.
3 years, 5 years, whatever, so that their citizens can have a predictable price and they can budget and all that stuff. So in order to do that, if you're a PJM participant, you're going to have to lay off the risk of price volatility to someone else, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
How would that be done?
So kind of back to those couple of slides that I was showing in terms of pricing comparison, there's hedging mechanisms. So there's hedge providers out there that you can secure at a particular amount. Sorry, let me just, yeah. So you can secure power at a particular amount, but that amount is going to be, first of all, it's probably around a 2-year contract in terms of the pricing that you can get. And then it's also going to be somewhat correlated to market pricing, right? So your pricing from 2 years ago is not going to be the same as your pricing quote today, because it does change in terms of what market, you know, where the wholesale market price is. And there is mechanism that you can do a hedge in terms of, you know, 2-3 years. And this is prevalent in deregulated states where there are retail providers for just selling you electricity. They would go out and then do this hedging for the next 2-3 years based on a collection of load that or residents that they sign up to become their customer. So that's usually done through, you know, one of the hedging providers or hedging process that we could kind of go into a bit more deep. Does that help?
So Naperville, if it has some staff that's dealing with this now, would be involved in the futures markets? Is that what you're saying? Or are there an intermediary who's involved in the futures markets? How exactly does that work without, you know, getting into way too much detail? I'm just trying to get a concept here.
Yeah.
And if Naperville lays off risk of price volatility
You're paying a
to
premium.
someone else,
Yeah.
that someone else is going to have a price premium
correct.
associated with that. So you're going to pay
That's
for
right.
that
That's exactly
service, right?
Yeah.
Is any of that built into your pricing estimates here? Or is
So
laying
this
off risk
set,
cost?
Yeah, so this set of pricing that we're seeing right now, like these couple of comparisons across, you know, the green versus the blue, and then the later ones, the deep, you know, dark green, light green versus that green. So yes, these do take into consideration. That's why I say it's a 2-year pricing structure. Because we do have a different services within CES that we do these type of pricing for retail providers. So that's how I get the information from them in terms of if this is a Naperville load, depending on whether you have resident, you know, I have a load profile that Brian provided me with, and that's how we go out and kind of try to get a sense of what would that pricing be. And that's why you're seeing like all these all-in pricing, which includes energy, capacity, ancillary services, everything that PJM is going to put on a bill and send to you. You have to combine that and then decompose it to how much am I going to charge for a resident, for business, for different rate class within the city, basically. So that's how we come up with this set of pricing. And that's why you're not seeing, so for example, the capacity pricing that you were talking about, it's a 10x increase from what it was last year, but you're not seeing a 10x increase on your final bill because capacity is a component of that energy pricing, and that's how we come up with these range of prices. So short answer is yes, we did take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you very much.
Go ahead, Nate.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess, Jim, I probably should have, when I voted for the mission statement, probably should have said reliable as opposed to consistent. So I guess that's on me. But yeah, I mean, this is kind of what we're doing, or what the goal of it was at the time. And I know some people in the audience had conversations with them about doing exactly this, because we want things to be reliable and cost effective while exploring these resources. Couple questions I had was earlier you talked about data centers moving away from clean energy. Do you have a
So
specific reason?
no, so it's not that they're moving away. It's that they see that clean energy is not going to come online fast enough to meet the data center needs. So what we're seeing is that earlier, yes, data centers wants to be, carbon free. They try to look for solar, wind storage, and as we discussed at length, that data center load is a fixed load. So when you have intermittent resources that might be there, that might not be there when you need it, it's very hard for data centers to actually manage that. That coupled with the fact that they're just coming online, the resources are coming online too slow for data centers to ramp up. And that's why if you watch the news, you do see that in PJM, data centers are trying to gobble up the load from nuclear because it's a flat load, it's a flat generation that they would be able to piggyback from. But we are also seeing that in southern states, we are also seeing that data centers are just going out there and then co-locate together with large gas resources because they can't find enough resources to supply this need. So they'll do whatever they can because the timing for them is more important than clean at this point.
Right. I mean, when you're trying to get to a server in a data center, you want to be able to actually get to the server.
Yeah. So the load is flat. You can't, there's nothing you can do about it.
No, I mean, people went crazy when TikTok was down, but if TikTok's down because servers are down, then it's, or anything really, but, and presumably as, for whatever requirements or reasonings or whatever, as data centers try to move away from those eventually, it'll put more issues, I guess you could say, on the capacity, and we'd still be seeing capacity issues with clean energy, I guess you could say.
Yeah. So sorry, let me make a correction. I'm not saying that data centers moving away from renewable. I'm saying that renewables are not coming online fast enough for data center to meet their needs. So they're looking for other resources.
Right.
Yeah.
But eventually, if they were available,
yeah,
and data centers move to them, it would put
correct. The demand pressure. Yeah.
Considerably more demand on the capacity.
Correct.
Which, as we talked about, looking at 2035, 2040, 2045, whatever, the amount that it's taking to get solar farms or whatever up will just, and presumably data centers would try to move in 20 years or 30 years or whatever, it's again going to put additional constraints on the capacity that we have available because it's all feeding from one. I know we talked about trying to get an emissions profile. When wind farms or solar farms or what have you are created, carbon's emitted. Is that correct?
When you say created,
sorry,
what?
Physically built,
right,
shipped, constructed.
Yeah.
That emits carbon, correct?
So you're talking about the life cycle emission of the entire building up a plant, or are you talking about the operating part of it? So operating part of it, there's no emission.
I suppose both, but would that be possible to include as part of the emissions profile?
So to really get to apples comparison on that part, if we're talking about life cycle in terms of manufacturing and then taking into consideration recycling and all that, you would have to do that for traditional or fossil resources as well. So that's how you kind of do an apples to apples. And I can get more into the life cycle analysis, but there's a lot of assumptions that are being made just on the manufacturing side. It depends on where you manufacture it, different grid connection. I would say for emissions purpose, I think it would probably make more sense just to stick to the operating part of it.
Sure, that makes sense. In terms of costs, what would it look like? I guess we kind of touched on this earlier. What would it look like if we were to use a PPA for solar, then go to market through PGM for additional capacity, I guess? I guess would that be right around that 80 rate plus the whatever PGM is at in the market?
You're saying that in terms of dollar per megawatt hour, what it would look like?
Yeah.
So I will need to do that conversion from capacity calculation to dollar per megawatt hour, and then plus whatever you're getting in the market. So basically, what you're asking is that if you have one wholesale market price today plus the capacity you want to purchase, you want to know what dollar per megawatt hour that looks like. Is that
Right,
correct?
right.
Yeah. I could do that conversion now. I can.
I mean, part of the reason I'm asking is because some want to transition, some want to move away from IMEA right now and get completely off of coal. I guess even if we did that, is there even capacity to serve all of Naperville right now?
So if you decide to go to PJM as a market, then you have to go and buy the 10 times increase that we were talking about in terms of $300 per megawatt day, and whatever that pricing is for the next round of auction, So what you're paying on capacity piece will just be subject to all that auction prices going forward.
Right, and even if we did that, that doesn't mean it's going to be clean energy, right?
Right, because capacity is it's separate from RECs and all that. It's just making sure you have that enough capacity to meet that peak demand.
Right.
Yeah.
If Naperville were not to renew, would Prairie State shut down?
This is not a question for me. It's probably for IMEA. And I did watch the video from last week. I think their answer was that they will probably continue to run Prairie State. But again, I'm not IMEA. I can't really answer that question.
I asked that question,
Yeah.
and they answered that they would not shut down. They would
Yeah.
continue to sell energy and
That's
make
what I
money
heard as well,
because
yeah.
they're a non-for-profit, so they would probably make more money.
Sure. I guess in your opinion here, do you believe that Prairie State is a reasonably priced, reliable energy source?
So,
just I guess in terms of pricing and reliability.
So in terms of pricing, and we were talking about the $37 per megawatt hour versus 75, which is with the PPA that you can get right now. I would say in terms of pricing, again, we can argue what pricing includes and all that, but just the fact that you're getting per megawatt hour of energy, this is coming from coal versus coming from a different type of resources like solar and wind. Yes, this is cheaper. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay. No, I guess just from my perspective, I really appreciate everybody who's come out tonight and last week, and hearing from the public. And in that regard, I mean, if prices were to go up tomorrow or whatever, I suppose I could, I'm in and many people are in a fortunate position to eat the cost. I guess we also haven't heard from the families that have to send their kid to school who haven't eaten breakfast or don't bring lunch. That's kind of the other side of the equation that I would also like to hear from. I mean, Naperville, we live in a fortunate city here where, I don't recall what the median income is at this point and the median household price, but there are families here that are struggling, can't, like I said, have trouble putting food on the table, and that's the other side of the conversation that I'd like to hear from. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Just one more. I don't know if this can make sense in here, but it feels like there's a lot of this conversation is it comes down to price, and everybody wants cheap energy, and everybody would love to have perfectly renewable energy at a low price. Even if the city of Naperville went outside of IMEA, there could potentially be ways to procure energy at the same cost or lower and it not be renewable. Is that possible? Like I'm trying to understand if we have maybe a mindset is off that moving out of IMEA automatically means that we're trying to go to renewable power. Renewable power is more expensive, and so it's bad.
Are you asking whether there are other sources out there that's not renewable but can be cheaper? Or are there other sources out there that's renewable but can be cheaper?
So one could make the argument, like, if we're really trying to serve the city of Naperville and price is king, and we want to make power as cheap as possible, are there other ways to buy power outside of IMEA that could even get it lower than what we're buying it from IMEA for in the near future? Setting aside renewable interests.
Yeah, so I think, I guess I was trying to address a little bit of that from that slide 14, 15, 16 in terms of comparison with ComEd, what ComEd's current rate is. And I would say, yes, you could say the difference is small. It's, let's see, $133 versus $120. And that's what, you could say outside of, and this is ComEd, outside of, we're not even talking about renewables, anything like that. This is like ComEd's last resort rate, right? So this is what they can offer. I think, from what I can see, given the contract that IMEA has with Naperville currently at $35 per megawatt hour rate, you probably won't get, and I'm not going to say you never, but I'm just saying that it's a really a very good deal already from the energy price perspective. But then, of course, there are other considerations on capacity and all that. That IMEA might have a different rate and stuff like that. But just on the energy piece in terms of dollar per megawatt hour, I would say their rate is pretty decent and low.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Well, thank you very much for going along with our questions and having the patience to help us get through this situation. Again, I thank the city for giving us this opportunity also to have the foresight to be able to hire a company to be able to research this in this way. All of the information we've picked up today goes towards helping us better understand what's going on and what we think is the best thing for Naperville. So thank you again. I'd like to thank the people that have been here.